You are Locked On Bruins Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Los Angeles on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
My, oh my, did that get scary once again? Forza Bruin Nation, what's going on? And welcome back to the latest edition of the Locked On UCLA Postcast, coming at you live, as always, directly after every single UCLA game, right here live, the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel, and after the fact, wherever you get the Locked On UCLA podcast feed. If you don't know who I am, my name is Gavin Carlson, former credentialed UCLA journalist with the Daily Bruin. I covered UCLA football for multiple years. I've been in the Rose Bowl. I've been in the press conferences. I've been in the press box. I've interviewed DeShaun Foster and company, Ethan Garbers, and plenty of those seniors that were on that field today. And the Bruins survive. They avoid another Fresno State scare. It would not have been the first time that UCLA would have fallen to Fresno State, and sure, it wasn't like years past where we had DTR and we were ranked and we were coming off big wins and we were losing to Jake Haener and whatnot in heartbreaking fashion. This is a UCLA team that came in 4-7. We know they weren't even playing for a bowl game berth. We know that this game was all about honoring the seniors, paying homage to the likes of guys like Ethan Garbers, like Logan Loya, and hopefully having an enjoyable last game of the season in the first year of the DeShaun Foster era. And for most of the game, we didn't get that. Let's be honest. I mean, another ugly game, fresh off of last week's 9-3 first half, and very disappointing loss to the school we don't even want to mention. And then we come out here and put up 3 points in the first quarter, 3 points in the second quarter, and it kind of reminded me of the Hawaii game to start the year, which is not what you want to see, right? You want to see, at the very least, improvement from your team from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. And we saw that in the middle of the year. But this game felt like the Hawaii game at the beginning of the year. UCLA, not crazy expectations, but going up against a team that we know we are more talented than, that we know we should beat. We know we should not be trailing at the half like we once again were today. And thank goodness the offense found a little bit of rhythm late, a touchdown in the third quarter, a touchdown in the fourth. But we have to talk about how UCLA ended this game, because if it was not for that last drive from Ethan Garbers, a very fitting way to end his career, fighting through tacklers, getting hit on every throw, having that huge roughing the passer where he takes a shot, it wouldn't be a farewell to Ethan Garbers and company if you didn't see him running for his life, if you didn't see him getting drilled, right? So how fitting that we do see that crazy last drive there, and a long, slow drive. I'm looking at the stats here on the left, if you wonder why I'm looking there. 15 plays. It took over 6 minutes, and it's exactly what you needed from UCLA. You're up 3. You need a long drive, put the game away, and that's exactly what we got. 15 plays, 76 yards, and it started and ended with Ethan Garbers running for his life. We saw Anthony Frias get some run with it being senior day, but obviously the roughing the passer was a huge call on a third down that keeps the Bruins drive alive, and from there, just pounding the rock. Timely throws from Ethan Garbers to Maliki Matavao, and then that beautiful read option call from Eric Bieniemy. Matavao with a huge block, sets up Garbers, and a couple throws here and there. Quasi Gilmer with that huge 5-yard catch. And finally, on 3rd and goal from the 2, a little play action. Garbers to J.Michael Sturdivant one last time for the 2-yard touchdown to put this one away. But that touchdown and that drive was really the only impressive drive for UCLA all game. Yes, was there a huge drop? Yes, was there a huge return taken back because of penalty? Yes, did UCLA have, I think, the most penalties we've seen in a game from UCLA, and this is a team that's been struggling with penalties all year. I believe they had 7 for 65 in the first half, something like that. Pretty unacceptable, and I know a lot of people keep rightfully saying, DeShaun Foster, how can your program, the number one pillar, be disciplined, and you continue to be an undisciplined team that has penalty after penalty? The final stats in terms of penalties, 8 for 70, a lot better in the second half, but still, you give Fresno State 25 more yards on penalties than you get in a game that otherwise was pretty even. Sure, did we outgain them 289 to 219 through the air? Yes. Sure, did we outrush them by 12 yards in a game that didn't have much running going on at all? Yes. We dominated possession, and we won the turnover battle. But the only thing we did not win was the penalty discrepancy, and that kept Fresno State in this game with key timely penalties, taking yards back, We had a bad drop, and this game was way closer than it needed to be. In the third segment, we're going to have a 2024 recap. We're going to preview 2025 under DeShaun Foster, say what we liked about this year, what we didn't like. And of course, you don't need to wait until segment 3 to know that penalties is going to be a huge discussion. It should not happen. I know that it's a young coach, a first-time head coach. I know it's a new coaching staff, but this is still a relatively old veteran team. And to have all these penalties all year, it was fitting that it was the case again today with the penalties, but it's still unacceptable, to say the least. But I thought Garbers looked pretty good despite, not having a touchdown until the third quarter. 26 of 40, 289 and a touchdown. Couple nice throws. Didn't get much help from his receivers today, in my opinion, except for Malik Monteval, 8 for 120. 8 for 120. Has one of his best games as a Bruin in that senior game. Quasi Gilmer, this is such an exciting thing to see because he can easily be J.Michael Sturdivant for the next 3 years. We know that J.Mike could come back, but Quasi Gilmer as a freshman to do what he did the last half of this season, to finish it off with a 6 for 54, pretty impressive, a 17-yard catch. Titus, we know the ups and downs he's had at UCLA. And then Logan Loya, I honestly wanted to see a little bit more from Logan Loya. He only had 2 catches for 40 yards, a 21-yarder and a 19-yarder. He has meant so much to UCLA in his time here, especially last year and the year before that with DTR especially. And so it would have been nice to see him have a bit of a bigger game in his senior night as well. But the run game was awful. TJ Harden and Keegan Jones really not a factor. 4 for 23 for Harden, 7 for 8 for Keegan Jones, and then Anthony Frias in his senior day goes 13 for 49. This game, we know coming in, it didn't mean much, right? You wanted to win the game, and it gave me so many flashbacks, like I was saying, to DTR losing to Jake Haener, to all the trouble we seem to have with Fresno State in multiple times. Like, they were dominating us the last couple of years in this quote-unquote rivalry or matchup, this series. And so it's always nice to beat Fresno State. It's not like we were huge favorites coming in, just 7.5-point favorites, and we were up 10. Fresno State's not a terrible team. They were 6-5 coming into today, but still, I honestly thought that we were going to win this game by double digits. I thought the 7.5 was too friendly to Fresno State. I expected this team to come out with a little bit more energy for 2 reasons. A, it's senior night, but B, you're coming off a loss to USC, a heartbreaker. I wanted to see a bit more life, and that's the one thing that I expect from a DeShaun Foster team in year one. Do I expect it to be polished all the time? No. Do I expect the play calling on either side to be perfect? No. Do I understand that he hasn't had an opportunity to have a recruiting class and have talent on the field? Yes. But I always expected DeShaun Foster-led team to come out with more energy than the other team. That's the reason he was hired, right? Because he's the leader of men that we were promised. And we saw that throughout the season at LSU, at Penn State, at Rutgers, at Nebraska, having these big wins at home against Iowa, right? These games that maybe UCLA wasn't expected to win, or at the very least was expected, in some games, expected to get blown out in. And instead, they came out with energy, playing hard for their head coach that they love, and having solid first halves, at least in some of those games, and in the other games, winning those games, right? So wanted to see that same energy from DeShaun Foster-led team of we're going to come out, we're going to play harder than the other team, we're going to care more, we're going to be more passionate, more fired up. And we didn't really see that in this one. It was disappointing, especially when you give up 10 points in the second quarter and suddenly you're down 10-6 going into the break, and there's absolutely no life in the Rose Bowl, which we all knew was not going to be full. But I was still hoping it was going to be a little more full. I was hoping we were going to have more energy. And the main thing I was hoping this team was going to give the crowd more stuff to cheer about. And we did not have any of that throughout the first half, especially. But at the end of the day, you do come out, you do win the game, you do survive. I thought Ethan Garbers, above all else, looked good in his final game. Wanted him to go out well. We know what he's done for this program in terms of good stuff and bad stuff. We know how much we put him through last year with Dante Moore, with Colin Schlee. We know that he was able to turn it around against Stanford and against USC, of course. And he had bright moments throughout this season as well, including a couple Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week type performances. So I know he is a polarizing figure in the UCLA community as a quarterback that didn't really accomplish much, but he wasn't really given much of a chance. And I think it was a good way for him to end his career. Solid performance. You have 289 yards, you have a touchdown. And, we all know that him beating SC for a second year in a row would have been the cherry on top of his career, but still, got to give Ethan Garbers credit for being resilient throughout his time here. And we'll talk about it in segment 3 once again, what the quarterback position is going to look like in 2025, because there's a lot of unknowns. But with all that being said, we're going to take our first break here on the Locked On UCLA Postcast. When we come back, we're going to talk about a few other stars, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We do have to say goodbye to one of the best stories in college football, in Carson Schlesinger, and he gave us another typical Carson Schlesinger performance in this one. So we have to give him his flowers. A couple other seniors on the defensive side of the ball that deserve their flowers as well. And then, like I said, we will recap 2024. We'll grade Eric Bieniemy, Keiko Malloy, and DeShaun Foster. We'll grade this season. How much of a failure, how much of a success was it? And we'll talk about 2025. We'll do all that after our first break here on the Locked On UCLA Postcast. And you can probably tell I'm doing this from my room in the Bay Area. My loyal Locked On Angels people know. So I am home for the holiday. I hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving. And we're keeping the production quality pretty good despite this. So we're going to take our first break. We're going to read these ads, and we'll get right back here on the Locked On UCLA Postcast. I'll be right back. Now, today's show is brought to you once again by Gametime. Now, if you don't know what Gametime is, you are missing out. Gametime is by far the best place to get tickets to sporting events, concerts, plays, musicals, you name it. You know, the thing that makes Gametime special is when you're like deciding last minute if you want to go to an event, you're going to get the best price with Gametime. I always tell the story of when I was in New York and I was on the way to a WNBA New York Liberty game, and I bought my ticket the day of on the subway. 3 days later, I'm on the subway going to a Yankees game, same thing. Bought the ticket on the app. They make it so easy. The best part is they have a new feature here called Gametime Picks, which it takes the fluff out of buying tickets, right? You go on these other sites, I'm not going to mention them, but you go on these other sites and they've got 300 tickets listed and 250 of them are ridiculously priced and you're never going to consider buying them. Gametime, it takes the fluff, it takes all those out. It just shows you the 20 to 30 best options at the best price, at the best value. So you can literally go on the app and in literally a minute, you can find the best seat, get a view from your seat, get the Gametime price guarantee, where you're going to get the lowest price guaranteed, and you can do it all in a matter of seconds. So please go use the code LOCKEDONCollege and get $20 off your first purchase. Again, use code LOCKEDONCollege at Gametime for $20 off your first purchase. I've done it. You need to do it. Once again, Locked On College on Gametime for $20 off. Gametime, by far the best way to get tickets. Back here live on the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel. This is the Locked On UCLA Postcast. Bruins win, Bruins win, Bruins win. That is headline number one on senior night against Fresno State in what is a game that didn't really mean much. A team coming in UCLA at 4-7. We know they missed the opportunity to make this a bowl game, clinching game when they lost their previous two games to Washington and USC. Definitely took some of the energy out of this matchup, because if you win either of those games, you are just a win against Fresno State away from clinching a bowl game in a year where a lot of people didn't expect it. But while that was not in the cards, while that was not a possibility, still proud of the team, able to get an ugly win at home on senior night at the Rose Bowl, senior night at the Rose Bowl. We have to pay homage to a couple other seniors. Number one being Carson Schlesinger, and you don't need me to tell you the story at this point. Former walk-on, a guy that no one considered to be a big part of this program, and all of a sudden in 2024, one of the best defensive players in the country, and I am not being a UCLA homer when I say that. This guy led the Big Ten in tackles throughout the year. He was leading the nation in tackles for most of this year as well, and he has another classic Carson Schlesinger performance tonight. 15 tackles. 11 solo. He has a sack and a TFL. About as good of a performance, once again, as you can have from this guy. And I know people close to him, once again, I've said it in podcasts in the past, that have said he is a guy who went from undrafted to now he is getting calls from agents. He is talking to people. He is getting looks to be a mid-round pick in the NFL draft. And so for him to have a career where it's one of those ironic senior nights for him where he didn't do anything his first few years here, but now because of one senior year, he is about as big of a loss on senior day as anybody. So shout out to him. One of the best stories in college football. Another 11 solo tackles, 15 total for him. Another one, and this one even more special to me as someone who's covered this team for years, and saw Kane Medrano, a guy who came in as a running back, converted to a linebacker. I remember 2 years ago, last year, this is a guy that was going to have a chance to be alongside Darius Musow, last year and be one of the leaders of the linebacking core this year. And he took those opportunities and ran with them. And another great game for him, 8 tackles, 7 solo, 3 TFLs for Kane Medrano. That's right. 3 TFLs. And I truly believe, Carson Schlesinger took a lot of the spotlight this year just because of how great of a story he was. But Kane Medrano, in my opinion, is every bit as good of a linebacker, and every bit as good of a story as a former running back, and every bit as good of a NFL prospect, in my opinion. So I'm really excited to see where Kane Medrano ends up. I do think he belongs at the next level. A couple other guys played really well. We know basically this entire secondary is a bunch of seniors. When you have the likes of Devin Kirkwood, and KJ Wallace and Kalen Moore, guys like that, Brian Addison of 1 year Bruin from Oregon. A lot of these guys that we are saying farewell to thought that they all had decent performances today. The defense did its job for the most part. They had 10 points they gave up in the second quarter, but other than that, they really didn't give up anything they didn't give up anything until that last drive of the fourth quarter. So shout out to everybody on the defense. I thought they were the better unit really the entire year. And I don't know if we expected that coming into this one. You saw a leader in Ethan Garbers. You saw all the talent. You saw Bieniemy coming in, and you kind of assumed the loss of D'Anton Lynn that the offense had more returning members other than the offensive coordinator itself, whereas the defense lost a ton of players, lost Kamari Ramsey and John Humphrey to UFC, lost D'Anton Lynn, right? And yet lost guys like Darius Musow, not to mention Liatu Latu, the Murphy twins, right? So for the defense to be, in my opinion, the better unit for really the entire season, you got to give a lot of credit to these seniors, to Schlesinger, to Medrano, to Olufemi Oladejo, to Jay Toya, of course, to all of the secondary players, Ramon Henderson and Devin Kirkwood and Brian Addison and all of them, for having this defense be the better unit basically every game this season. They deserve a lot of credit when a lot of people expected them to take a major step back. And of course, Ikaika Malloy deserves a lot of credit for that as well. In terms of this game, I didn't really see much from Fresno State, to be honest. We knew they were going to come in and throw the ball a lot. They did do that. Absolutely nothing on the run game for them. Just 6 carries for 41 yards for Donaldson. Delana had 1 carry for 20 yards. And other than that, they really didn't do anything. Mikey Keene reminds me a lot of Fresno State quarterbacks. Small, gritty, not the best athlete, but going to make plays. And he was pretty good. 30 of 43, 219 and a touchdown. A lot of short throws, of course. When you're averaging like 7 yards of completion, obviously wasn't the biggest, game in terms of throwing the ball down the field, but still was impressed with him, able to kind of look once again like Hawaii, completing short passes, keeping in this game all the way until the final drive. And for so many reasons, it felt like Hawaii. And for so many reasons, it's kind of ironic that we weren't able to have a better performance against a similar team an entire season later. But at the end of the day, credit to Fresno State for keeping it close. This is not a bad football team, already a bowl eligible team that we are not. So we had to come in and respect them. But shout out to the seniors, specifically on the defense, for getting the job done. When we take our last break here, we're going to talk about regrading this 2024 season. What grade does DeShaun Foster get? What grade does Ikaika Malloy get? What grade does Eric Bieniemy get? What do we think of the season as a whole? And what are my expectations for 2025? We'll talk about all that after our last break here on the Locked On UCLA Postcast. We'll be right back. Now, finally, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, if you don't know what FanDuel is, you must be living under a rock, because it is America's #1 sports book. And right now, you can take advantage of the NFL action, the college football action. I mean, talk about that game last night, Georgia, unbelievable. Georgia Tech. Thank goodness USC wasn't able to stun Notre Dame. Shout out to Michigan for getting it done against Ohio State, right? Whether it's that, the NFL, the Thanksgiving games, all that. The action is better when you've got action on the line with FanDuel, America's sports #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if they hit their first $5 bet. All you have to do is download or go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, with your first $5 bet, if you win it, you're guaranteed hundreds of dollars in bonus money. Guaranteed. You just got to win your first $5 bet. So not only is it the best place to make bets, but as the best interface, you can track live scores and stats on the FanDuel interface. So again, FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Hit that $5 bet, and you've got hundreds of dollars in guaranteed bonus bets at your arrival. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here live one more time on Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel. This is the Locked On UCLA Postcast, the final Locked On UCLA Postcast of the season. It's been a fun run. Once again, if you don't know who I am, I'm Gavin Carlson, former credentialed journalist covering this team with the Daily Bruin 2 years ago and last year, a UCLA alum, a lifelong Bruin fan. And so it's been really fun to have this season with you guys. I apologize for the maybe slightly less quality streaming quality. I am on my phone. I am back in the Bay Area. Normally I'm in my apartment in Los Angeles. I'm in LA, or excuse me, I'm in the Bay Area for the Thanksgiving holiday with family and whatnot. But it's been a great season in terms of the postcast. Maybe not the best season for UCLA football. And that's what we're going to do right now is recap 2024 one last time. If you don't remember, coming into this year with Chip Kelly doing what he did, leaving so late, leaving UCLA football at such a standstill in terms of who was going to be the next leader, how much time were we going to take to find the next leader, us choosing DeShaun Foster, staying internal to try to ease the transition, have a new face, a new culture at UCLA. But the expectations were still low. Over, under 4, 4.5, somewhere 5 at the max wins. That was the expectation. And for UCLA to completely underwhelm at the beginning part of the season, starting 1-5, and still hit that 5-win total, it is impressive. If this team would have won either of those games against USC or Washington, and if this game meant bowl eligibility, I would have said, you know what, throw out everything, give everybody an A. The fact that you were able to turn 1-5 into a bowl game would have been really, really impressive. Now, obviously, we weren't able to do that, but still, I'm not going to be as harsh and grading here. I think we're going to start with the Keiko Malloy and this defense, like I said. Well, just to quickly recap, if you somehow forgot, UCLA started the season with a really embarrassing 16-13 win in Hawaii. Then they got absolutely destroyed 42-13 against Indiana, an Indiana team that at the time we didn't think was very good. Now we know they are, possibly making it to the college football playoff. So that doesn't end up being a bad loss. You lose on the road at LSU. You probably expected that. You lose at Oregon, or hosting Oregon, who's now the #1 team in the country, without a doubt. Clear #1, by the way. Then you lose at Penn State, who is a top 4 team playing in the Big Ten championship. So you lose to the 2 best teams in the Big Ten. You lose to one of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten in Indiana. And then the only bad loss, in my opinion, was that game at home against Minnesota. That felt like the one that you should not have had. That was kind of inexcusable against a guy in PJ Fleck who wanted to be a UCLA head coach, because we all know UCLA is a better program than Minnesota. So that loss hurt, certainly. And to lose 5 games in a row there after an underwhelming game against Hawaii, you easily could have packed it in, right? You easily could have packed it in. But instead, huge 35-32 win at Rutgers, then a huge 27-20 win at Nebraska, and then the hugest win of them all, the biggest win of them all, 20-17 at home against Iowa, in my opinion, the most impressive win of the year, before you lose 2 in a row at Washington and at home against USC. And then finally you beat Fresno State. So really, if you were able to win either of those previous two games, that would have countered the Minnesota loss, in my opinion, and made it really an ideal season. You would have been 6-6. You would have beaten all the teams you were supposed to, plus some you weren't supposed to beat. But instead, that Minnesota loss hurts, the Washington loss, and of course the SC loss, those hurt as well. But given all the context, given how hard that schedule was, probably the toughest 4-game stretch any team has had in college football when you're talking about Indiana, LSU, Oregon, Penn State. That is brutal. So you expected to lose those games, right? With all that being said, the defense was the bright spot throughout most of the season, right? You're able to, of course, do your job against Hawaii. You got blown out by Indiana, but the defense was solid in the first half against LSU. Defense certainly did its job for the most part against Penn State, against Minnesota, against Nebraska, certainly against Iowa, shutting down their run game. Even in the SC game, held them under 20 points. So the defense deserves a lot of credit. And I'm going to give Akiko Malloy, I'm going to give him like an A-. I don't really know what else you could have asked for him with the talent that left, like we said earlier in the show. Latu, the Murphy twins, Kamari Ramsey, who I think is so good, John Humphrey as well. To lose all those guys and to still have a pretty solid defense. Sure, it's a secondary shaky at times. Yes. Did it get scorched by Indiana? Yes. Did it get scorched by Oregon? Did Penn State have a big second half? Did Rutgers score a lot of points? Yes, but still, I think the defense deserves a lot of credit to have guys like Schlesinger blossom into superstars, Madrano, Olufemi Oladeja, Jay Toya, those guys reach their potential. I think Akiko Malloy in his first year as a DC deserves a lot of credit. So I'm giving him an A-. I thought he had about as good of a year as you could have for a team that went 5-7, right? As for Eric Bieniemy, this one I'm going to be a little bit more harsh. I'm giving him a B-. A B-. That's pretty harsh, right? I mean, it's not as D or anything, which you could still give to a guy whose team scored 16 points against Hawaii, 13 against Indiana, 17 against LSU, 13 against Oregon, 11 against Penn State, 17 against Minnesota, right? No 20-point performances until you put up 35 at Rutgers, 27 at Nebraska, 20 against Iowa. So that's why I'm giving Eric Bieniemy. Here's the reasons why I'm giving him a B-. You have a quarterback in Ethan Garbers who can make an argument as a top 7 or 8 quarterback in the Big Ten in terms of experience, the weapons around him. TJ Harden, J.Michael Sturdivant, Logan Loya, Malik Mataval, Quasi Gilmer, Titus Moley. There's so many weapons on this team. So I think obviously the offensive line was by far the biggest weakness of this entire team, and it held this team back all season long. But in the first half of the season, felt like Eric Bieniemy could have done better to help out Ethan Garbers, to help out this offense, knowing how bad the offensive line was. Not to mention, I don't care. I know offensive line is a talent thing, but you have to be able to play call around it and also help your offensive linemen get better. And I know there were so many injuries that didn't help as well, but I thought Eric Bieniemy just could have done a better job at the beginning half of the year. I mean, the first 5 games, 6 games, you got to give them like a D-, right? Now, of course, they turn it around and have an amazing stretch, 35 at Rutgers, 27 at Nebraska, 20 at home against Iowa. And so, sure, that's a B+ type of stretch from Eric Bieniemy, but still, I am way too high on guys like J.Michael Sturdivant and Logan Loya and Ethan Garbers himself to look at the offensive output this season and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to give Bieniemy a B+ or something. I think there's too much talent on this field to act like UCLA was outmatched talent-wise against most teams and that they should have been putting up 11 points at Penn State and whatnot, right? I thought the fact that it took Ethan Garbers getting hurt and Justin Martin being put in the game for Eric Bieniemy to start coaching and calling creative plays and getting the ball out of his quarterback's hands quickly and whatnot, that's unacceptable. And so a lot of expectations with Eric Bieniemy coming in. I don't think he met them. And I thought there was too much talent on the field to justify the lackluster offense throughout most of the season. So that's why I'm giving Eric Bieniemy a B-. And then, of course, that takes us to DeShaun Foster. I'm just going to give him – this one's tough. Whew. I can't – I want to say he deserves like a B, but I think I have to give him like a B- as well. And the moral of the story is we know he's not calling plays on either side. We know, as despite being a former running back, he has no say in what plays are being called by Eric Bieniemy and all of that. But if I'm going to criticize Bieniemy, you have to criticize the guy who brought him in. If I'm going to criticize all of the penalties all year, if I'm going to criticize the lack of adjustments in terms of having an awful offensive line the entire season, if I'm going to criticize those questionable 4th downs, kicking long field goals, or going forward in the wrong moments, horrible clock management at times, and then, like I said just now, and I'll say it 3 more times, the penalties, right? If I'm going to be that critical of all of that, I can't in good faith, as much as I love DeShaun Foster, give him a B+. even though 5 wins exceeded the expectations of many, even though this team was a couple plays away from overcoming 1-5 and winning a bowl game, even though all of that, I just felt like, once again, in terms of what you're asking DeShaun Foster to do, he's not calling plays on either side. He's supposed to be the guy who's organizing personnel, creating a culture, discipline. We didn't see it. Coming out hot, energetic. We didn't see it against Oregon. We didn't see it against Minnesota, right? Those types of things. Being a disciplined program and a confident program in terms of, we're going to go for it on 4th and 1s and we're going to get them, right? We didn't see that against SC. We didn't see good decision making at times, kicking long field goals and whatnot, managing the clock. So because of all that, I'm giving DeShaun Foster a B- as well. Not terrible, not a C, certainly a passing grade, and not even a bad passing grade in terms of, you're in the B range and not the C range, but still a lot to be desired from Bieniemy, from DeShaun Foster. And in 2025, the number one thing I want to see, of course, it's going to be a new guy at quarterback. But how are we going to help the quarterback? There's too much talent on the field at times. Quasi Gilmer looks like a stud in the making. We're hoping J.Michael comes back. Please. If you have J.Michael and Quasi Gilmer, those are 2 deep threats. If you can have an offensive line that can protect for them, if you can get the ball into these athletic receivers' hands, this should be an offense that's good. I know that Keegan Jones and whatnot, they're going to be gone, but most of the talent on the offensive side of the ball, other than Logan Loya, Monteval, whatever, is going to be there. Harden, Sturdivant, hopefully, Quasi Gilmer, whoever the quarterback is. Maybe they go portal. Maybe they trust the likes of Justin Martin and company. We'll see. But at the end of the day, I think the offense needs to be better. The defense, if we get the same defense next year, I think that's okay. I think that's a win. Expectations, do you come into next year saying the over-under has to be higher? I do think so. I know that the schedule was brutal this year. I know it was a quick turnaround, losing Chip Kelly and whatnot. So you have a whole offseason now. You have your recruits coming in. Quarterback's going to be a huge question mark. But other than that, the offensive line can't look any worse. It physically can't look any worse than it looked this season. Want to see our talented receivers get the ball more. The running game needs to have a resurgence throughout the entire season, not half the season. And I think this offense can be better. So in terms of win expectation, I'm not saying this team's suddenly going to win 9 games, but I think the bare minimum has to be 6. You have to win 6 games next year. Year 2 with DeShaun Foster, with a talented roster. We'll see what the quarterback position is looking like, but 6 wins has to be the minimum. It's UCLA. This is not, some of these other schools in the Big Ten. This is UCLA. I know we're not Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, but we need to be better than the Michigan States of the world, the Rutgers of the world, the Nebraskas of the world. We've proven that we can be better than the Iowas of the world. We need to be better than the Minnesotas and all those types of teams. So this is a team that should be in the top half of the Big Ten every single season, not 3 or 4, not in the college football playoff picture anytime soon, but top 10 in the Big Ten every year. The top half of the Big Ten every year. You have to be there, right? And so that means at least 6 wins. You got to make it to a bowl game. You have to beat those middle to lower tier Big Ten teams consistently. And then this time, I want you to steal a game or 2 against one of those elite teams, unlike we did this season. But with all that being said, we're going to wrap this one up here on this final edition of the season of the Locked On UCLA Postcast. Once again, it was really fun being with you guys throughout this season. If you liked this show and any of the past shows, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be back tomorrow with the Locked On Rams Postcast. But as we do, as always, and especially on this senior day and final day of the season, we got to end it with a 8 clap. So hands up. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight. FSC. Glad they lost today. I was at the Rose Bowl yesterday. Shout out to all the people who watched that, or last week. Shout out to all the people who watched that. That was brutal. So glad USC lost today. I'm glad that we won. So it was a great year. Appreciate all the love and support. Once again, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll be back tomorrow, but it was a great year, and I'll be back next year. That's the plan for more UCLA content here on this channel. Take care, everybody. Go Bruins. Have a great rest of your weekend. Get home safe on the travels with the holiday and whatnot. And as always, go Bruins. Take care, everybody.